In the dead of winter, beneath a sky of swirling snow and endless night, the Canadian wilderness becomes a world of shadows and silence. The wind howls through frostbitten trees, carrying with it secrets that have never been spoken. Somewhere in the darkness, a lone figure, Joe Label, moves cautiously, his breath hanging in the frozen air, his eyes wide with dread. He stumbles upon a village, its huts abandoned, doors creaking in the icy wind. Not a single footprint mars the snow. The silence is absolute, unnatural. Label calls out, but only the emptiness answers. Inside, a pot of stew sits frozen mid-boil, untouched. A child's mitten lies beside a half-sewn parka, needle still threaded, as if its owner vanished in the middle of a breath. Outside, the horror deepens. Sled dogs, chained and skeletal, lie motionless in the snow. Starved, abandoned, their eyes frozen open in terror. For the Inuit to leave their dogs is unthinkable. Something monstrous has happened here. At the edge of the village, graves have been torn open. The earth is frozen, yet the stones are cast aside, and the bodies are gone. The aurora flickers above, but a strange blue light pulses on the horizon, something not of this world. Local legends whisper of Tornarsuk, the vengeful spirit, and of lights in the sky that steal souls away. Witnesses speak of a terror that cannot be named. Label flees, haunted by the feeling that he is being watched by something ancient and malevolent. This is the story of the Lake Anjikuni village, the village that vanished. What happened here remains one of the world's most chilling and unsolved mysteries. And as you watch, remember, some secrets are meant to stay buried. November 1930. In the vast, unforgiving expanse of Canada's Northwest Territories, the sun is a fleeting promise. It cast a cold light across the frozen river as a lone figure, Joe Label, packed his canoe. The air was sharp, the silence absolute. He was a tiny speck of life in an immense, indifferent landscape, setting off on a journey that would lead him into the heart of an inexplicable darkness. Label was a seasoned trapper, but the season had been cruel, his expedition yielding almost nothing. With supplies dwindling, his hope rested on a small, familiar dot on his map, a welcoming Inuit village on the shores of Lake Anjikuni. He'd been there before, greeted by the warmth of its people. In the brutal calculus of northern survival, it was his only lifeline. For hours, the only sounds were his paddle and the groan of ice. Then, he saw it. A thin plume of smoke rising against the pale sky. A wave of profound relief washed over him. It was a sign of life, of warmth and safety. With renewed strength, he aimed his canoe toward the shore, where the small collection of huts promised sanctuary from the encroaching cold. The canoe scraped ashore with a sound that seemed deafening in the profound quiet. He walked into the village, expecting the usual sounds of life, dogs barking, children laughing. But there was nothing. An unnatural silence hung heavy in the air. He called out a greeting. Only the wind answered. He reasoned it away. Perhaps the men were out hunting. But as he moved from one hut to the next, a cold dread began to creep into his heart. Every single one was empty. The scene inside made the silence even more terrifying. Fires still crackled in the hearths. A pot of caribou stew simmered over the embers, left to burn. Half-sewn garments lay beside bone needles, as if abandoned mid-task. Everything pointed to a community interrupted in the most mundane moments of their lives. They hadn't packed or prepared to leave. They had simply vanished. Stumbling back outside, a new horror awaited him. The village's sled dogs, their lifelines in this frozen world, were still tied to their posts. Their skeletal remains were a testament to a slow, agonizing death from starvation. For an Inuit community to abandon their dogs was unthinkable, a violation of the deepest codes of survival. This discovery shattered any rational explanation. Something was terribly wrong. But the most ghastly discovery was yet to come. At the village's sacred burial ground, Label found a scene of ultimate desecration. The frozen earth was torn open, the stone cairns that marked the graves cast aside. This was no simple grave robbery. The burial sites were empty. The bodies themselves were gone. An ancient taboo had been broken. Local folklore warned that only the most malevolent of spirits would disturb the dead. Panic seized him. The sun was sinking, and the thought of spending the night in this cursed place was unbearable. He felt unseen eyes watching him from the shadows. Grabbing what little food he could carry, he fled to his canoe, his heart hammering his ribs. As he pushed off into the icy water, he risked one last look back. The village was no longer dark. A strange, ethereal blue light was pulsing over the horizon, bathing the empty huts in its ghostly glow. It wasn't the aurora. It was something alien. And in that moment, Joe Label knew he had brushed against a terror he could never hope to understand. In January 1931, a detachment of Royal Canadian Mounted Police, led by Sergeant J. Nelson, embarked on a grueling 560-mile journey to Lake Anjikuni following Label's garbled telegram. Along the way, they made disturbing discoveries. At a local hospital, they questioned an Inuit trapper named Seek, recovering from extreme frostbite. He spoke feverishly of an evil spirit called Tornarsuk. At an Innu village 150 miles away, they learned of a 10-year-old boy who had wandered into their settlement during a snowstorm 2 months earlier. He hadn't spoken a word since. Most troubling was the testimony of trapper Armand Lorion, who reported witnessing strange bluish lights in the night sky and a large cylindrical object that transformed into a bullet-like shape before speeding toward Lake Anjikuni. After a grueling journey through the unforgiving Arctic landscape, the Royal Canadian Mounted Police finally reached the shores of Lake Anjikuni. The air was still, unnaturally so. The silence was a physical weight. The Mounties found the village exactly as the terrified trapper, Joe Label, had described. It was a small, isolated community home to perhaps 30 souls. But now, it was utterly and inexplicably empty. A ghost town frozen in time. Constable Nelson, leading the investigation, moved cautiously from one empty hut to another. The cold inside was deeper than cold outside. A palpable sense of dread hung in the air. Every detail painted a picture of life interrupted with terrifying suddenness. He found meals left to burn, now welded to their cooking pots over long-dead fires. In another hut, a child's caribou skin coat lay on a cot, a needle and thread still piercing the fabric, as if the seamstress had been plucked away mid-stitch. It was as if the entire village had simply evaporated in the middle of their daily routines. But perhaps the most disturbing discovery was outside. The village's sled dogs, essential for survival in this harsh land, were found dead at their posts. Their frozen remains lay scattered, chained and skeletal. They had starved to death. This was a profound violation of Inuit custom. No hunter, no matter the circumstance, would ever let their dogs suffer such a fate. It was a chilling testament to the fact that whatever had happened here, it was something that defied all logic and tradition. The final and most sacrilegious discovery was made at the village's sacred burial ground. Nelson found that the graves of the ancestors had been opened. Several depressions in the ice marked where bodies once lay, but they were now empty. The corpses were gone. Even more bizarre, the ice around these holes was frozen hard and unnaturally smooth, showing no signs of being dug by hand or tool. It was as if they had been melted open from below. Adding to the surreal scene, the traditional stone grave markers had been removed and stacked in two neat piles nearby. It was a desecration, but one performed with an inexplicable, almost ceremonial precision. After hours of fruitless searching, with the Arctic twilight descending and a growing sense of unease among his men, Nelson ordered a retreat. They left the silent village behind, a chilling tableau of a vanished people. Back in the relative safety of civilization, Nelson filed his official report. It was a document of stark contradictions. He noted the abandoned rifles, the food, the desecrated graves, yet concluded there was no evidence of foul play. He could offer no explanation for how or why an entire village of 30 men, women, and children had disappeared off the face of the earth, leaving everything but their bodies behind. What could explain the sudden, silent disappearance of 30 people, leaving behind a ghost town swallowed by the vast Canadian wilderness? The clues they left don't offer answers. They only deepen the abyss of the unknown. The mystery of Lake Anjikuni isn't just a story of missing people. It's a tale of an event that defies the laws of our reality. For Joe Label, the trapper who stumbled upon the scene, the first chilling sign was the silence. Then he saw the smoke from smoldering campfires. The people were here just hours ago. The lingering warmth was a ghostly handprint, proof of recent life, making the current, absolute emptiness all the more profound. Whatever happened, it happened fast. Inside the huts, the scene was a tableau of interrupted life. A pot of caribou stew sat frozen over a dead fire. A child's parka lay half-mended, the needles still threaded. There were no signs of a struggle, yet they had abandoned their most vital possessions. Rifle sleds and kayaks, essential for survival, were all left behind. To leave these was a death sentence, an act no sane person would commit. The horror compounded with the discovery of the sled dogs. A team of huskies, the village's lifeblood, were found starved to death, still tied to their posts. This cruelty was unthinkable for the Inuit, yet just feet away were huts filled with food. Why would they abandon their dogs to starve? And why hadn't the desperate animals broken free? It suggests a fear so powerful it overrode even the instinct for survival. But the most sacrilegious discovery lay in the village cemetery. The ground, frozen as hard as iron, had been violated. Ancestral graves were opened, the bodies removed. For the Inuit, this was the ultimate taboo. The stones marking the graves were neatly stacked, and the earth was excavated with impossible precision, showing no signs of tools. The empty graves gaped at the sky, a silent, horrifying question. With no rational explanation, some looked to the sky. Reports from other trappers and police mentioned strange lights in the weeks prior. Not the familiar aurora, but a pulsating, bluish craft that moved with intelligent purpose. Could the villagers have been beamed away by an extraterrestrial craft? It's a fantastic theory, born of desperation to explain the inexplicable. Or does the answer lie in a more ancient terrestrial fear? An injured hunter found wandering deliriously spoke of Tornarsuk, a vengeful spirit from Inuit folklore. A towering, malevolent entity with tusks, a being that could command blizzards and hunt the souls of men. He claimed this great evil spirit had descended upon the village not to kill them, but to take them, leaving behind a cursed and empty shell. Over the years, the RCMP have maintained that no crime took place, and that the story is at best an exaggeration. Some suggest Label may have embellished his account for money, that what he found was merely a temporary camp whose inhabitants had moved to permanent settlements elsewhere. Various retellings have added their own embellishments, sometimes changing the number of disturbed graves or suggesting the structures were tents rather than permanent buildings. If it truly was a makeshift camp, This would offer a more mundane explanation, but too much time has elapsed, and there is no obvious source for further evidence. This mystery, like so many others in the Canadian wilderness, will forever remain exactly that, a mystery.